Boldwood presents How to Get Even, written by Pippa Roscoe and read by Ruby Alexander. Sun Tzu on the Art of War, the oldest military treatise in the world. Translated from the Chinese by Lionel Giles, M.A., 1910. Released as Project Gutenberg's ebook number 132. In the beginning, Chicago, O'Hare Airport, 21st of December. Bella ignored the phone that vibrated in her hand. Twice. "Are you sure?" asked the flight attendant, blinking between her and the little old lady. Bella looked at the large window showing a runway quickly becoming buried beneath mounds of snow from the sudden blizzard that had taken everyone by surprise. Not that anyone should really be surprised by snow. In Chicago, 4 days from Christmas. "Ma'am, this is the last flight out of here," she repeated, as if wanting to make absolutely sure Bella knew what she was doing. "It could be hours before another one can leave." Bella heard the warning and looked into the green, watery eyes of Delia, the elderly woman who was desperate to get home to hold her grandchild for the first time. And what did Bella have waiting for her in upstate New York? A loving family, a huge tree with fairy lights topped with the angel her sister had made in 3rd grade, presents, a delicious meal, all the things that almost any sane person would kill to have for Christmas. Anyone but her. "Absolutely. Please give Delia my seat and arrange for me to be on the next available flight," Bella replied determinedly. The flight attendant shook her head but did as she was asked while Bella fired off a text to her sister. "I'm fine, honestly." "Please stop asking me," Bella silently begged. "I'll let you know when I have flight details. Love to Mom and Dad." "Oh, thank you," cried Delia, trembling with happiness. "I just couldn't bear it if I missed her first Christmas." "Just promise to give that beautiful little girl a kiss from me," Bella said with a genuine smile. "I will. I truly will," Delia exclaimed as the new boarding pass was printed. The flight attendant shot Bella an unimpressed look as Delia grappled with her 3 bags, as if it were Bella's fault the older woman was flouting hand baggage rules. The flight attendant shot Bella an unimpressed look as Delia grappled with her 3 bags, as if it were Bella's fault that the older woman was flouting hand baggage rules. "Bless you, sweet child," Delia said, nearly losing her book as she reached for the boarding pass. "Oh, here, take this," she said, thrusting a paperback at Bella. "You probably need this more than I do," she said, with a saucy smile, disappearing down the gangway before the flight attendant pulled a rope across the exit. Bella stared at the book in her hands, a lurid pink flyer peeking out from behind the pages, catching her eye. Just desserts, opposite Gate 7. Pictures of cocktails and cakes and a pretty cartoon design called to her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had cake. Certainly not since before the... What did you call a wedding that didn't happen? An unwedding? A non-wedding? Either way, before it, she'd been following a calorie-controlled diet to fit into the perfect wedding dress. The kind that all little girls, and a few boys too, dreamed of. The kind that her father had paid an almost eye-watering amount for. Guilt and shame welled in her empty stomach, and suddenly, all Bella wanted was sugar. An obscene, high-octane, chest-exploding, fall-off-the-wagon amount of sugar. With the airport full of stranded passengers, she probably wouldn't get a seat. But maybe, just maybe, one good turn deserved another, she thought as she pulled the flyer from the page. And then she choked on a gasp as she caught sight of the paragraph the flyer had been hiding. "Fuck me, Daddy, please. I've been such a bad girl." Bella slammed the book shut, looking around her to make sure that no one had seen what she had. Her cheeks flamed hot and bright, and she used the book to fan them. "Delia!" She laughed at herself as she put the book into her purse. Cake, cocktails. And then, maybe, she'd read that book. Just desserts loomed up ahead, bright and pink like a beacon amidst the chaos. Bella was hit with such a strong sense of caramel and chocolate that her mouth actually watered. She scanned the cafe's packed tables. Each one was excessively full of people guarding them possessively, glaring at anyone who looked their way. She was about to give up when a woman with bright magenta streaks in her hair caught Bella's eye. Bella smiled back automatically, because there was something in the woman's eyes. Recognition? Expectation? Then the woman winked. Someone passed between them and the woman was gone. But there, in her place, it was. A table in the middle of the chaos, shining like the Holy Grail. Worried that it would disappear like a mirage, she hurried over and reached a chair just as another woman grabbed the one to her left, and another came careening out of nowhere, just managing to stop opposite her before taking out a fourth woman who reached for the adjacent chair. Bella's heart sank. If any of these women had companions, she'd have to give up her seat. "If none of you are with anyone else, we could share?" The eclectic redhead asked in a British accent that reminded her a little of Ollie. Burying the thought beneath the relief she felt at finding a seat, Bella smiled and nodded. Introductions were made as layers of coats and scarves and bags were removed, each finally sitting down at the table with a sigh and a grateful smile. Paige, the redhead with freckles and a gorgeous smile, was British, as was Astrid, who had glossy brown hair and an aura of irrepressible energy that made Bella slightly wary. Sienna was a fellow American and had big blue eyes and golden hair that made her look like a Disney princess. "Would you think me a terrible lush if I got a glass of Prosecco?" Paige asked hesitantly. Prosecco. It was 10 in the morning and Bella would never ordinarily drink at such an hour. But suddenly she wanted to. Suddenly she wanted more than anything to be someone who drank when the fancy took her, ate as much cake as womanly possible. She wanted to be a bad girl. Bella cleared her throat and kicked the purse containing Delia's book further under the table. "I'll have a glass," she told the waitress after Sienna suggested getting a bottle. "And some water for the table, please." Bella wasn't quite prepared to let go of all her sensibilities in one fell swoop. Bella squinted at the second bottle of Prosecco. When had they ordered that? Deciding it was unimportant, she pressed her fingertip to the crumbs of her second red velvet cake, popped them into her mouth, and savored the mini sugar bombs exploding on her tongue as Astrid peppered Paige with questions about her virtual assistant business. Astrid had her own business, something she could be proud of. And Bella was hiding until the furore died down over the disaster of a wedding that never happened, so that she could finally assume her role at her parents' foundation. Which was what she wanted, she reminded herself sternly. "Is that why you're in the US? Work?" Astrid asked Paige. "No, I was at a wedding in Chicago." Bella flinched. "Oh, how lovely. How was it?" Sienna asked dreamily. Pavlova dress." Bella's had been sleek. A $20,000 Vera Wang in ivory silk from bustline down, topped by a swath of delicate lace crossing her chest and arms. Drunken best man speech. Bella had forbidden Ollie's best man from drinking until after the ceremony. Smushing cake into each other's faces, a handsy Uncle Chip. Bella downed the remainder of her Prosecco, fearing the damp heat pressing against the back of her eyes might actually horrifyingly escape. "I'd rather not talk about weddings." It was the only lump in her throat that stopped her from adding, "if that's okay." "Not a fan?" Paige asked. "Absolutely not," Bella confirmed. "Don't believe in love?" "I did," Bella admitted. "And then 6 months ago, I stood up in front of 400 guests to let them know that my groom wasn't coming." She pressed her lips together to keep the sudden well of unruly emotions from escaping. "Holy mother of..." Astrid spluttered as she clutched Bella's forearm. You were jilted? Yep, by text. The morning of. By text? Astrid's mouth flattened. Bella smiled, letting the women's sympathy, their outrage, soothe the hurt caused by the wedding guests' horrified fascination. He's not a bad person, really. He just did a bad thing, she admitted honestly. And he wasn't. But Ollie had told her that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. Let her believe that. Let her plan for how her life would be with him. He was a bit of a... She searched for the right word. Peter Pan. Commitment wasn't his strong suit, and I made the classic mistake of thinking that it would be different with me, she admitted with a shrug, feeling embarrassed and ashamed that she'd been so foolish. Doesn't excuse him leaving you at the altar, Sienna said. Via text, Astrid stressed furiously. No, it doesn't, Bella replied, reaching for her glass before realizing it was empty and putting it back on the table. Well, you can string mine up, Astrid announced. Unbeknownst to me, he'd already trotted up the aisle and merrily said, I do, to someone else. He turned you into the other woman? Bella asked, outraged. Too right he did. Are you freaking kidding me? Sienna asked, shaking her head in disgust. He's an artist, too. All about creating the feels in people. Chase Miller can give you the feels, all right. The kind you want F all to do with. Chase Miller. Bella blinked in surprise. She'd seen one of his paintings only last month in Paris. She remembered it immediately. A huge, sprawling canvas that had stopped her in her tracks. How could such an incredible talent be wasted on a man who would do such a thing? What is wrong with these men? Bella demanded. Doesn't marriage mean anything anymore? I don't think men get the concept of commitment, Sienna mused. Even the ones who seem to are just faking it. Bella leaned in, her heart going out to the sadness she felt from Sienna. What happened? My ex kind of discarded me. It wasn't like some big dramatic breakup. I didn't even get the chance to throw plates. I mean, we were just kids, but we were each other's firsts, you know? They all nodded in understanding. And I thought we were going to have a life together, but he hightailed it out of town without a backward glance. Just like Ollie had done to her, Bella reached across to squeeze Sienna's hand. I'm so sorry, she said. That's terrible. While the girls talked about beheading deserving men, Bella wondered whether perhaps life was better off without men altogether. My ex posted naked pictures and video of me online. He'd taken them without my knowledge or consent. Bella's head snapped up, Paige's words igniting a phosphorus flare deep inside her. Revenge porn? Hissed Sienna in disgust. I've never felt so degraded. Paige's gaze dropped to the table, and the anger that Bella had kept at bay for months morphed into a physical thing, a living, breathing monster that demanded payment for the hurt inflicted on Paige. I met Harvey at Oxford. He was studying IT, and I was a third-year law student. No prestigious law firm was going to take me on after that. Hell, not even a terrible law firm would. And I couldn't bear staying on at Oxford, where everyone had seen the pictures, so I... Paige shrugged. Dropped out. Bella's heart thumped painfully. Ollie might have hurt her, but nothing compared to the violation that Harvey had done to Paige. It was clear from the painful blush on Paige's freckled cheeks how much she struggled with it. Bella clenched her hands into fists. What a bastard! Absolute bastard, Sienna agreed furiously. The table fell quiet, and Bella wondered if the others, like her, were imagining suitably painful punishments for Paige's evil ex. They shouldn't be allowed to get away with that kind of crap, Sienna said eventually. Astrid slapped her glass down on the table. Damn right they shouldn't. What if we... Sienna glanced around the circle and leaned in a little. Look, I know this sounds crazy, and I may be a little drunk. Bella wondered if they were all a little drunk. What if we took it upon ourselves, Sienna continued, to exact some revenge? Bella frowned, curious despite herself. How do you mean? I don't mean murdering them or anything, she dismissed, which was, Bella thought, a shame in Harvey's instance. I mean, look, these guys have had everything go their way, right? They got to walk all over us, or walk out on us. Why should they just get to live their best lives while we're picking up the remnants of ours? Why not have a little fun at their expense? Sienna continued. Nothing serious. Stuff that would inconvenience them. That we could have a laugh over. Like signing them up to hundreds of mailing lists. Switch out their clothes for a size or two smaller. That kind of thing. The idea struck something in Bella, like a tuning fork finally hitting the perfect note. For years, Bella had done everything in her power to do the right thing. Don't cause a scene. Don't make a fuss. Hell, she even coordinated the unpicking of her own wedding, even though she hadn't been the one to call it off. But while she was considering being a little naughty, it didn't mean she suddenly become reckless. She leaned in. Some of those things would require us to get close, she said, almost at a whisper. They'll know it was us. There's no way we'd get away with it. Sienna smiled triumphantly. That's why we picked someone else's ex. Oh, that was good. Who would you pick? I'd take your cheating married bastard ex, Bella declared, cheeks flush with an anger she spent far too long suppressing. Chase Miller had pulled the rug out from beneath not one but two women, and he deserved to pay. As the girls divvied up the rest of the ex-boyfriends, the idea gained momentum in Bella's mind. Look, this only works if we all agree, Sienna said, suddenly serious. And nobody should feel pressured into doing it if it doesn't sit right. God, fuck yes, Astrid declared, slightly less enthusiastic than she had been before. The last thing I want to do is browbeat my new co-conspirators. Sorry, besties. Best friends. The phrase caught at something in Bella's chest and pulled. The truth was, she wanted to do this. Not just for herself, but for them too. As if feeling the same, she felt Paige's gaze on hers. Paige would, if they all agreed, be tackling Ollie. Her job as a house-sitter making her the perfect person to invade the pristine hidey hole he'd slunk back to in Cornwall, England. I do love a good cream tea, Paige said with a small smile. I'd be safe there? Definitely, Bella reassured her. For all his commitment-phobe tendencies, he's a gentleman. And I know he feels bad, which I'm perfectly okay with exploiting to get you in there. I still have his number, she offered. Paige looked a little hesitant, and suddenly it felt absolutely vital that Paige say yes, that this happen. Because if it didn't, then Ollie got away scot-free and... Look, how about this? What if Bella texts and then we leave it up to the universe? Sienna suggested. If he texts back while we're all still sitting here at this table we randomly ended up at, then it's a go. If he doesn't, we've all had a laugh and filled in a few hours. No harm, no foul, Sienna offered with a shrug. Ooh, I like that, Astrid added. Me too, Bella said, and she did, because it meant that the universe had decided it. Not four women who had quite possibly consumed more alcohol than was advisable. Okay, yeah, Paige said, nodding once definitively. Okay. Bella felt everyone's eyes on her as she took out her phone. Ollie, a friend of mine needs a place to stay in Cornwall for a bit in the new year. She's very nice and won't bother you, she read as she typed. She paused. It needed something more. "You have room," she typed. "And you owe me," she added for good measure before hitting send and putting the phone onto the table. And there it sat, in the center of their circle, everyone staring at it as if it were an unexploded bomb. "Don't answer it. Answer it." Her conscience wavered back and forth. A nervous silence stretched over the table until it became almost funny until the incoming text chimed and startled them all. "Is she a Roger Prendergast groupie?" she read out loud. "Not lovely to hear from you. How are you? How have you been? Are you okay after telling our family and friends that I couldn't bring myself to marry you?" When Paige admitted that she didn't know Ollie's famous actor father, Bella typed out a single word: "No." And his response was lightning fast. "He says fine," Bella confirmed, unable to believe how easy that was. Because that's what it had been. Easy. And now, all of a sudden, Paige, a virtual stranger, was going down to Cornwall to stay with her ex-fiancé to wreak revenge for her. And she was going to take revenge against Astrid's married lover, Chase Miller. But as she looked around the similarly shocked faces of women who she knew with absolute conviction were no longer strangers but friends who had bonded deeply, no matter how quickly, she felt something that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Excited. "Okay then," Paige said with a smile. "Looks like I'm off to Cornwall." Without quite knowing how, another bottle of Prosecco arrived on the table, and Astrid filled their glasses. "To just desserts," she announced, as Last Christmas could be heard over the PA system, and they all tapped their glasses together. Paige took a hefty swallow and turned to Bella. "Now, tell me more about this, Ollie." With the table now littered with water bottles and packets of chips, a concession to savory carbs that they had all agreed on, Bella sat back in her chair. She was surprisingly exhausted after info-dumping an almost encyclopedic knowledge of the man she'd been about to marry onto Paige, who had just excused herself to make a phone call. Bella was beginning to sober up, and the sugar high was threatening to turn into a sugar crash. She thought that perhaps that might make her see sense, might make her feel a little wary about what they had agreed. But it hadn't. If anything, this gave her something to do over the Christmas period, something to think about instead of her parents' awkwardly given concern. It gave her something to plan. And Bella was very good at plans. She picked up her phone, pulled up Google, and typed in Chase Miller. The first few hits were various photos of him in poses that would be considered an artist at work. Bella huffed out a cynical laugh. He probably had art assistants who did most of the actual painting. The next result was a picture of Chase grimly staring into the camera lens. "That's from my profile, the one I wrote," Astrid said, leaning over and peering at her screen. "It's how we met," she explained. Bella scanned the piece. "It's good," she observed. "It's really good." "I know," Astrid said with an easy and wholly justified confidence. Astrid's profile was informative, easy to read, and wry. Her personality shone through but didn't dominate, giving a solid impression of her subject. It was as if Bella was reading a meeting of the minds, and she could see how Astrid would have found Chase Miller fascinating. Fascinating and dangerous. And clearly a lying, cheating scumbag. As she swiped to another page, the announcement of a new gallery opening in New York caught her eye. Chase Miller to head to New York Nyack Gallery this spring. Bella frowned. Why would someone in supposedly the height of their creative career take a job as a gallery director? What was he running from? Probably from another scandal, Bella thought. That was how these men worked, wasn't it? For all they knew, Astrid could have been just the tip of the iceberg. Well, Bella wasn't going to let that happen. He didn't get to just start all over again. None of them did. Then she caught sight of a job posting. Communications Director for Nyack, New York. Huh. Well, She did have some time to kill before she took up her role at her parents' foundation, didn't she? She felt Astrid's gaze on her. What? I don't know what you're planning, Astrid said, but the look in your eyes says you're up to no good. And I like it. Bella bit the inside of her cheek, but couldn't stop smiling. Astrid was right, because Bella, the perennially good girl, was about to do some very bad things. And Chase Miller wouldn't even know what hit him. Chapter 1. All warfare is based on deception. The Art of War, Sun Tzu. Just Desserts WhatsApp group, 15:05 EST. Astrid. Bella, you're panicking, aren't you? Sienna. Are you? Are you okay? Paige. A little panic is understandable. Bella bit her lip. She was very much trying not to panic. But as she let herself into her brand new apartment with absolutely huge floor-to-ceiling windows that beckoned her towards them with a display of Central Park that most Americans would give their right arm for, it was safe to say that her current state was absolutely and undeniably one of panic. What on earth had she got herself into? Astrid. Are you in yet? What's the flat like? The serviced apartment was amazing. Bella was hardly a stranger to wealth, but this? She turned around in a circle, taking in the modern kitchen, laundry facilities, and near-futuristic amenities. The apartment had a voice-activated home assistant and 24-hour access to a concierge who had already let her know about a delivery waiting for her. Her family had country money, old money, but this was city money. Urban, luxurious, modern. She placed her bag on the kitchen island and took in the minimalist design that defined elegance. A buttery soft caramel leather sofa set bracketed a fireplace, the surround a modern concrete strip against the clean white walls. A large cream sheepskin rug sat on hardwood flooring that warmed the gray tones of brushed chrome furnishings. It should have looked cold and uninviting, but it was easy to imagine herself curled up on the sofa covered in a blanket, or bare toes curling in that sheepskin. In a daze, she wandered towards the door off the living area and entered a bedroom that stopped her in her tracks. Her phone buzzed from messages flying back and forth between the girls, but Bella barely noticed. At least half were from Astrid, who was also in New York and trying to find time in a very busy schedule for them to meet up. Here, too, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan that was breathtaking. Winter's dusk painted the sky in remarkable shades of pink and early evening purples. A few stars were out already, peeking down the snow-covered rectangle of Central Park stretched out in front of her. Of course, the position comes with an apartment, Tejveer Nayak had informed her eagerly during their second interview over video conference. His willingness to hire her had surprised her, even though Paige, who had finessed Bella's CV with something bordering on ruthlessness, had insisted that she would be a shoo-in for it. Having applied for the job in between Christmas and New Year, she'd not expected to hear anything until mid-January at the earliest, so it had been quite the surprise to find a reply waiting in her inbox the following morning. "He's desperate," Astrid had announced gleefully. "I wonder why the previous person left," Sienna had asked. "Does it matter?" Paige had intervened. Not one bit, Bella had decided. Tej Nayak had been affable and laid back to a point that nearly caused Bella concern. But as the job was simply a means to an end, it hardly mattered. In fact, Tej had been almost more excited about the apartment she would be staying in than the role of communications director she would be filling. "You're gonna love it. And just wait until you try the shower," her new boss had said affably, while Bella wondered if that was entirely appropriate. "It has everything you could need, and if it doesn't, then let me know and we'll get it for you." Paige, have you seen him yet? Him, her target. Chase Miller. the cheating scumbag who had betrayed his wife and an unknowing Astrid. Bella wandered towards the incredible view, barely seeing the wintry magic of New York stretched out beneath her. And just like that, panic melted like ice beneath the salt of her fury. It had been hard for her to be angry with Ollie, which she knew was crazy. The girl's outrage at his behavior had soothed a wound she'd been hiding from the world. Hidden, because Bella Carmichael didn't get angry, didn't cause a fuss or make a scene. And even though Ollie had stood her up in front of nearly 400 of their closest friends and family, she knew he hadn't meant to. Well, no, he absolutely 100% had meant to, actually. He'd done so because it was easier to leave her to clean up his mess. And he'd known she'd do it, because that was what she did. But she also saw how he would have struggled to tell her that he couldn't go through with it, how it all would have become too much for him. But Ollie was different to Chase Miller, because there was absolutely no justification for what he'd done. None whatsoever. Bella, I haven't met him yet, but I promise when I do, he'll rue the day. Sienna, oh, I love it when you talk posh like that. Bella smiled, taking the affectionate teasing from Sienna exactly as it was meant. Astrid, have you figured out what you're going to do to him yet? Perhaps if she'd known Bella for longer, Astrid wouldn't have even asked that question, because Bella had everything short of a PowerPoint presentation on how she was going to ruin Chase Miller. She had ordered a copy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War and decided that the book of military strategies and tactics was perfect to help her get even with Astrid's ex. She'd filled an entire journal with the research she'd done during the awkward Christmas she'd spent with her family and sister, and Bee's new fiancé. Bella swallowed, hating herself for feeling mean about her sister. Bella would never begrudge her sister's happiness. But Bella couldn't help but remember how she and Ollie had announced their engagement, how her parents had oohed and awed over her engagement ring. Her father had seemed rather impressed by Ollie, who she'd met at a charity gala for non-Hodgkin lymphoma. She'd known of Oliver Prendergast, of course. You couldn't be a female and not know of him. And while on the surface, the son of the famed British actor had been exactly what she'd expected, 99% charm, there had been something deeper that had called to her. He was educated, bright, witty. He'd made her laugh, and when he'd asked for her number, she'd given it to him. Over the next few months, they'd met up when he was visiting New York or when she was near California, and they'd fallen into a long-distance relationship. And the glimpses she got of the real Ollie, the one behind the mask, were enough to make her believe that they had something special. Then his father had died, and he'd seemed so lost that she'd wanted to be there for him. Bella hadn't minded making the preparations for the funeral, managing his family, and bringing them all together. So then when Ollie had asked her to marry him, it had felt like the natural progression of their relationship. She'd honestly thought that he was ready, wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. And she had what she'd always wanted, her person. Someone who would stand by her, who would keep her, who would choose her. But she'd been wrong. And now her sister was embarking on the life that she'd always wanted, and Bella hated how hard that was to watch. But she'd shoved her hurt behind a locked door and taken Bee, who deserved every damn bit of happiness coming to her, into her arms and told her truthfully how happy she was for her. Only her mother hadn't looked wholly convinced. But when she'd tried to ask Bella about it, Bella had shaken it off. Because she was fine. Wasn't she? So, it had been a blessed relief to be able to beg off the family festive joy a little and focus on exactly what would be the perfect karmic comeuppance for a man like Chase Miller. And while her family thought that she was prepping for a job interview, which she had been, she'd also been working out how to make a man like that hurt. Because it wasn't through his heart. He clearly didn't have one. No, it was his ego, his reputation, his standing in the art world. Bella. Oh yes, Don't you worry about that. I have a plan. Chase Miller had a headache, one of those take me out back and kill me now kinds. It had perhaps been stupid to try and smash it out at the gym, even though sometimes that did actually work, especially when the headache was hangover related, which it was. But the gym had not worked today, he reluctantly acknowledged as he swallowed down an entire bottle of electrolyte water. Sweat stuck his vest to his chest and his gym shorts to his ass in a unique and distinctly uncomfortable way. He just needed to get back into his apartment, and then he could drown under the weight of the, as promised, impressive jets of water in the ensuite shower. Man, Tej really did love talking about that shower. And he had not lied. It was an excellent shower. He massaged his temples as the elevator rose from the basement gym to the lobby where the door slid open. Eyes closed, he heard someone shuffle their way into the elevator just as his phone began to ring because, thanks to Tej's insistence, the entire building was wired for Wi-Fi. Chase bit back a groan, accepted the call, and tried to ignore the walking pile of boxes next to him. "You are not allowed to scare this one off," Tej announced by way of a greeting. "This one what?" Chase growled. It was the third call he'd fielded from his old friend, new business partner that day. "You can thank me later." "Thank you?" "You're welcome," Tej announced with glee. "No, wait, what?" Chase asked as he dug a thumb into his throbbing temple and fielded the cell and water bottle in the other hand. "Who?" "The new director of comms. She starts Monday." Chase let out a scoff. "Shouldn't I have had some say in hiring?" The mountain of boxes next to him shifted their weight from one high-heeled foot to the other. "Yeah, well, we didn't really have time to fuck around, my friend. We're opening in just 3 months, and your last hire quit." "Before I could fire her," Chase pointed out. "And this one can start tomorrow. So there." "Name?" "Bella Carmichael." Chase frowned. Why did he recognize that name? Did he? Or was he just so hungover his brain was playing tricks on him? "She's a pampered princess socialite," he remembered now. The boxes shifted again. "She has a degree in business management and communication from Harvard." "They all have degrees," Chase ground out. "Isn't her father something big in aerodynamics?" People like Bella Carmichael didn't have dads like his. They had fathers, mothers, maters and paters. "How can you remember that and not my birthday?" Tej asked defensively. How could he not? The day he landed back in the States, the papers had been filled with headlines about the Redondo runaway groom, or something like it. The damn catchy alliteration had stuck. Miles of column inches had been full of speculation as to why the groom had disappeared, many laying the blame at Bridezilla Bella's feet. Someone had knocked together a guesstimation of how much the entire wedding had cost. It was a mind-numbing amount of money, even to Chase, who had at one point been considered to be one of the most sought-after contemporary artists around the globe, and certainly inconceivable to the son of a mechanic and a librarian. The black and white pictures of the abandoned reception at the California vineyard had felt almost crime scene-worthy, slashes of white silk rippling in the wind from ribbons tied on the backs of empty seats, an ornate flower garland arbor where the bride and groom should have stood. He and Annalise hadn't had anything like that. Jesus, they'd had a registry office and his best friend as a witness. At the time, it had felt urgent and romantic, and fucking idiot that he was, he thought he was the luckiest guy on the planet. No. Chase knew exactly who the luckiest guy on the planet was. The Redondo runaway groom. Chase could only imagine what kind of bridezilla could scare off a fiancé on the day of their supposed wedding, despite the volume of scrutiny they were under. Clearly, the guy had made a lucky escape. And now Chase was lumped with the very same bridezilla. "Does she even have any experience?" Chase demanded. "Why does she want this job, huh? So that she can swan around New York saying she works at the Nyack Gallery?" Dude, Tej exhaled. There are genuinely worse reasons. No, there aren't, Chase bit back, knowing that it wasn't true. He wasn't quite sure why he was so adamant that he didn't want her working there. His mind's eye flashed him a black and white photo of her on her supposed wedding day. The camera had caught her mid-turn, hair in some sleek updo, lace slashed across her torso, the delicate arc of a shoulder blade highlighted in shadow. Her face, pure elegance, even in the midst of such chaos. Her grace had somehow infuriated him. Because surely she couldn't have remained so calm if she had even an ounce of feeling for the person who had betrayed her. He hadn't. Jesus, Tej, if she can't even hold down a groom, how is she supposed to hold down a job? Okay, enough, bro. You've got your grump on, I get that. And usually I'm amenable to that, given, But now you're just being mean. Being scolded by Tej was like being scolded by your favorite school teacher or your granny. As someone who was almost singularly good-natured, it was the verbal equivalent of, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. What was worse was that Tej was right. Chase was being mean. He had absolutely no idea what kind of person Bella Carmichael was, and he, of all people, wasn't in a position to make assumptions. Chase began to mumble something about a headache, but Tej pressed on. She is qualified for the position. She does have experience. I do have faith that she is what we need, and I think you will both work excellently together. And since she'll be living next to you, I expect you to be on your best behavior. Chase's gut tightened as he side-eyed the boxes in the elevator beside him. Shit. Fuck. Shit. He glanced at the floor numbers on the elevator panel, and only his floor was lit up. His floor. Their floor? Oh, God, this was bad. Gotta go, Chase said, swiping across the phone screen and slipping it into the pocket of his gym shorts. He bit his lip, mentally wincing. It was possible that the person behind the boxes usually used for moving things, like a person's life into a new apartment, wasn't the person he'd just been mouthing off about. Possible, but horrifyingly unlikely. The elevator arrived at the floor and the doors opened. After you, he said, voice gravelly from the guilt lining his throat. The boxes rippled. Was he imagining things? Christ, he hoped so. But as the boxes passed him, he caught a glimpse of a high cheekbone and a sleek blonde chignon. Fuck, he inwardly groaned. He ran his hand through his hair as he followed in her wake. There was no shaking this off. Christ, what had he called her? A pampered princess socialite? He kept his eye firmly above ass level as she walked straight over to the door opposite his and put the boxes down to reach for the key. Do you need a hand? He offered reflexively before wincing at the look she gave him as she straightened up. No, she answered, and then, as if absolutely incapable of stopping herself, she added a thank you that was as much fuck you as humanly possible. There were slight traces of red slashes across her sharp cheekbones, and he could see it. Why she'd made such an impact on him. She looked him dead in the eyes. Complex and varied shards of gray slammed at him like an assault. The flecks of gold, both hot as fire and cold as ice, reminded him of Turner's snowstorm. Movement, slashes of anger, defiance, determination. And for the first time in nearly 12 months, his right hand twitched. The itch as if from a phantom limb, taking him wholly by surprise. He rubbed the back of his neck to buy some time as he gathered himself. Look, The door slammed before he'd even finished the word. And yes, he deserved that. Just Desserts WhatsApp group 2136 EST. Bella. That man is a you-know-what. Paige. You can say it, Bella. We're all adults here. Sienna. What happened? Astrid. My money is on Bella meeting Chase Miller. Bella. The man is a menace, the worst kind of snob, mean and utterly undignified. Astrid. Sounds like Chase Miller. Bella. I am going to make him pay. Paige. Yes, you are. Astrid. You go, girl. Chapter 2. She will win who prepared herself, waits to take the enemy unprepared. The Art of War, Sun Tzu. Operation Trojan Horse. Lull CM into false sense of security. Identify key players. Become likable. Become invaluable. Bella had identified the location of the gallery 15 minutes ahead of her arrival, had visited the highest-rated coffee shop within a 4-minute walking radius, and was now standing on West 30th on a very cold January morning in New York, in front of what would be the Nyack Gallery. A glass-fronted ground floor framed in thick black metal with gold edges created a stark contrast with the classic New York limestone building. Central enough for decent foot traffic and certainly in the right district for art, the gallery was well positioned between culture and cuisine to make it an attractive prospect for visitors, and that was without Nyack's name already making it worth a look. Chase Miller as gallery director drew even more notoriety. His reputation as an artist, albeit slightly longer than a New York minute ago, was still impressive and one that some artists would be uncomfortable vying for attention with. But then again, notoriety was notoriety, and in the art world, that meant money. Her fingers gripped the stacked cardboard trays holding enough coffee cups to allow for nearly every possible permutation of coffee possible. Chase Miller. It had been one thing to look him up online and another altogether to see him in person. Being forced to listen to the litany of her perceived inadequacies by a man who had cheated on his wife and dragged another woman unwittingly into the mire with him had been nothing short of galling. By the time she had exited the elevator and reached her door, she'd been almost trembling with rage. Until she'd put down the boxes and turned to find all 6'4" sweaty, toned inches of the man looking somewhat embarrassed at having been caught bad-mouthing his new direct report. And then she'd been trembling for a whole different reason. But her initial and momentarily confusing response to him had only been, she'd decided at some point around 2 a.m. the following morning, because she had expected Chase Miller to have devil horns and crimson skin. So, seeing him dressed in sweaty workout gear that showed off a physique she would admit only on pain of death was nothing short of spectacular, had been simply that. The difference between expectation and reality. Usually, Bella would urge on the side of charitable. He clearly hadn't known it was her, and she could concede that he had every right, as director, to question the qualifications or lack thereof of his new staff member. But Bella was done being charitable. No, she was here to declare war on Chase Miller and his ilk. Sun Tzu level war. She glanced up. The number 72 was placed in simple but elegant gold typography. The thick glass door, sandwiched in between two large front windows with a thick strip of frost running across both, afforded a little privacy while creating curiosity too. Nerves unfurled within her. What if she wasn't good at the job? What if the other staff didn't like her? And then, a very Paige-sounding voice said, "You got the job. We didn't lie on your CV." Astrid mentally chimed in, too. "Listen, love, you handled that press storm around your wedding. You can sure as shit handle the comms for a gallery. At least until you need to, that is." 1 month ago, she hadn't even known these women existed. And now she knew them well enough to hear them in her head. But they were right. She wasn't there to do a good job. She was there to do a certain job. And that job was to secure the downfall of Chase Miller by any means necessary. And that Bella was certain she could do. Shifting the tray of coffees to one hand, she pressed the button with a little bell sign on the intercom. "Hello?" "Bella Carmichael," she said confidently, "your new communications director." Bella stepped out of the gray, frosty cold into the warm embrace of soothing neutral tones and temperature-controlled warmth, and gave in to the temptation to sigh. The frosted windows either side of the entrance had concealed a large space that was surprisingly comforting despite its bare white walls. There were tracks along the ceiling, which she presumed were for movable walls to create smaller, separate areas for a more intimate viewing, and towards the back of the gallery, the space opened out in an area that could be used either for group pieces or individual artwork that commanded greater focus and attention. "Oh my God, it's really you!" a female voice exclaimed at a level of such surprise, Bella wondered whether the you was actually someone else. She turned to find a young brunette with wide brown eyes looking at her with something like awe. Frowning, Bella resisted the urge to look behind her. "You're so pretty!" the girl exclaimed, and at this Bella's eyebrows shot upwards. And I'm so sorry about your wedding." The rapid fire of statements caught Bella in a stunned vortex. "Alison Burberry, you leave that poor woman alone," a strong masculine voice ordered from the bottom of a staircase at the back of the gallery. She watched as a tall man regally descended from the floor above. He had cheekbones half of Manhattan would die for and glowing ebony skin. The look he sent her was skeptical, but it wasn't anything she hadn't overcome before. "Mr. Bambeau," she said, placing the name to the face from her research on the gallery. She closed the distance between them, hand outstretched. "It's really lovely to meet you." He replied, as if the jury was out, and would remain firmly out until she proved herself worthy. Bella maintained her smile, respecting that territorial lines were being drawn. "It's so nice to meet you," Allison exclaimed, and for a second Bella thought she might actually jump up and down. "Me and my sister were also Alpha Phis and saw you speak at the NHL charity in Boston 3 years ago." For a moment, Bella's mind blanked. That was the night she'd met Ollie, and it took more effort than she'd care to admit to yank herself back from it. Glaring at the girl, Bambeau inhaled his impatience before continuing. "Please call me Maurice. The offices are this way," he said, leading her towards the back of the gallery. "There'll be time for a full tour a little later, but we have a 9:30 meeting scheduled." Bella checked her watch with a frown. 9:25. "I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of a meeting," she said, unsure how she'd missed that. She'd spent the whole of yesterday syncing her phone to her Nyack email account and reading through all the messages she'd been copied in on following her hire. Worried that she'd not activated her alerts correctly, she pulled out her phone to double-check. "That's okay. The email only came through 10 minutes ago." "Nope, nothing." Maurice peered over her shoulder. "An oversight, I'm sure." Unconvinced, Bella followed Maurice upstairs into a surprisingly light space. More glass walls sectioned the floor into 2 rooms.